A 12-year-old boy lives on the streets with his sick mother, unaware that he carries an unfinished story in his blood. Everything changes when he sees, on the wrist of a wealthy man in a wheelchair, the same faded tattoo his mother has. That encounter unveils a forgotten past, rekindles a lost love, and begins a new chance for all three of them. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. And now, on with the story. The London cold never forgave, especially in the early hours of a July morning when the biting wind invaded every crevice of the abandoned building in the city's East End. Gabriel curled his thin body over the stacked cardboard, trying to shield his mother from the wind that swept in through the glassless windows. She was coughing a lot, and every time the hoarse sound echoed in that empty space, the 12-year-old boy felt his chest tighten in a way he couldn't explain. The fever had returned. He knew it from the tremors in her body, her labored breathing, the sweat that dampened her forehead despite the bitter cold. Gabriel rose slowly, wrapped the only torn blanket they owned around his mother's shoulders, and went out into the still dark street. He needed to get some money. Anything. The medicine from the chemist's cost £9, and he only had 3 coins in the pocket of his worn-out trousers. The streets were beginning to stir. Bakeries opening, bus drivers starting their routes, hurried workers, heading towards the tube stations. Gabriel knew this routine well. They had been living like this for 4 years, ever since they lost the shack they lived in after his mother could no longer pay the rent. Before that, life was already hard, but at least they had a roof. At least they had a place they could call home. Now, home was this construction site, halted for years, with its exposed bricks and unfinished floors. During the day, the site's security guards would pass from a distance and pretend not to see them. At night, Gabriel and his mother became invisible, just 2 more shadows among the many others the city preferred to ignore. The boy stopped on the corner of Commercial Road and began to do what he did every day. He offered to help carry bags, asked for spare change, cleaned windscreens at traffic lights when the council officers weren't around. Some drivers honked their horns in irritation. Others averted their gaze, uncomfortable. A few extended a crumpled note through the window, and Gabriel would thank them with a smile that no longer reached his eyes. 2 hours later, he had managed to get £12. Enough. For the medicine and maybe a loaf of bread. He ran to the chemist's, bought the fever reducer and returned to the building. His mother was still asleep, wrapped in the blanket, her pale face a stark contrast to her dark, disheveled hair. Gabriel wet a piece of cloth with water from a communal tap he could reach on the adjacent lot and gently wiped her forehead. Marianne opened her eyes slowly. They were tired, sunken eyes, but they still held that sweetness that always calmed her son. She tried to smile, but a cough interrupted the gesture. "Here, Mum, I got the medicine," Gabriel said, helping her sit up and offering the tablet with a little water. "You're a good boy, my son. Too good for this life," she whispered, her voice hoarse and weak. "We're going to get out of this, Mum. I promise. When I grow up, I'll get a real job. I'll rent a house for us. You'll have a real bed, food every day, medicine whenever you need it." Marianne held her son's hand. It was a small, calloused hand, with the dirty nails of a boy who worked on the streets. But it was the most precious hand she knew. She squeezed it gently, and Gabriel felt something rough brush against his fingers. He looked down and saw what he always saw, the old faded tattoo between his mother's thumb and index finger. A simple design, a small anchor intertwined with a rose. The lines were blurred by time, the blue and red ink almost fused with her skin. He had always been curious about that mark. Ever since he was a child, when they still lived in the shack, he would ask about it, and the answer was always the same. "Mum, tell." "Me again." "About the tattoo?" Gabriel asked, sitting down beside her. Marianne took a deep breath. Her eyes filled with that sadness Gabriel knew so well. It was an old, deep sadness, the kind that doesn't fade with time. "I've told you this story so many times, my son, but I like hearing it. Please." She ran her free hand over her face, as if trying to organize the memories that insisted on returning. "I was very young, 18. I worked as a cleaner in an office building in the city center. That's where I met him. A man different from any I had ever seen. He wore a suit, spoke eloquently, was well educated, but he wasn't arrogant. Quite the opposite. He always greeted me, asked how I was, treated me with respect. "And then you fell in love," Gabriel completed, knowing every word of the story. "Yes, we fell in love. It was intense, you know, the kind of love you think will last forever. He said I was the woman of his life, that he would take me away from that difficult life, that we would build a family together, and I believed him. I believed every word." Marianne's voice broke. She had to stop to cough again. Gabriel waited patiently, holding her hand. "One day he took me to get this tattoo. He said he wanted us to have a mark that would unite us forever. The anchor represented the stability he wanted to give me. The rose was me, the flower he had found in the middle of the city's chaos. We got them together. He got his on his wrist. I got mine on my hand. On the same day, at the same place." Gabriel looked at the tattoo more closely. Even faded, you could tell it had been done with care. It wasn't just any design, it had meaning. "But then you found out you were pregnant," the boy continued, already knowing the rest of the story. "Yes, I became pregnant with you. I was so happy, Gabriel. I thought I would finally have a real family. I ran to tell him. But when I got to the office where he worked, I saw a scene that destroyed everything. He was with another woman, a blonde secretary, well-dressed, put together. They were laughing together very close, and when she leaned in and kissed him, I felt my world collapse." Gabriel's mother closed her eyes as if she could still see that scene clearly. "I didn't wait for an explanation. I didn't want to hear excuses. I just left. I moved away, went back to the countryside, stayed with a cousin for a while. By the time you were born, I was already alone, completely alone, and I swore I would never look for that man again, that he didn't deserve to know you, that he had betrayed me, had thrown away everything we had." Gabriel felt the familiar anger rise in his chest. It was an old anger, fueled by years of suffering and deprivation. "He's a coward, Mum, a coward who abandoned you when you were pregnant." "That's what I've always thought, my son. It's what I'll always think." Silence filled the building. Outside, the sound of traffic grew louder. The city was waking up completely, indifferent to the dramas playing out in its forgotten corners. "Do you remember his name?" Gabriel asked, breaking the silence. Marianne hesitated. It was a question her son asked from time to time, and she always avoided answering. But this time, tired, sick, exhausted from carrying that weight. Alone, she let it slip. Edward Allman. But it's no use knowing Gabriel. He's probably far away. He's probably forgotten I ever existed. He probably has a family, a good life. People like us don't exist for people like him. Gabriel committed the name to memory. Edward Allman. The man who had the same tattoo as his mother. The man who had abandoned them. The father he had never known and never wanted to know. In the following days, Marianne got worse. The fever wouldn't break. The cough became increasingly heavy. Gabriel tried to get money for more medicine, but it wasn't enough. She needed a doctor. She needed a hospital. But how? They didn't have up-to-date documents, no fixed address, no one. The boy spent his mornings on the streets, trying to scrape together every possible penny. In the afternoons, he would return to care for his mother. At night, he would stay awake, afraid she might stop breathing. The desperation grew with each passing day. It was on one of those mornings, a cloudy Wednesday in July, that Gabriel decided to venture further afield. He had heard that in the Mayfair area near the luxury hotels it was easier to get money. The tourists were more generous, the wealthy Londoners more affluent. He took 2 buses, using the coins he had saved, and got off at Piccadilly. The contrast was brutal. Here, everything was different. Mirrored buildings, designer shops, expensive restaurants, imported cars. Well-dressed people walked hurriedly, talking on their phones, carrying shopping bags. Gabriel felt even more invisible than usual. He walked to Bond Street, headed down towards Mayfair, passing art galleries and sophisticated cafes. He stopped in front of an imposing hotel, with a doorman in white gloves and a red carpet at the entrance. It was the kind of place he only saw in television commercials in appliance stores. He stood there, offering to help carry luggage, opening taxi doors, doing what he could. Some guests gave generous tips. In 2 hours, Gabriel had made almost £30. It was more than he could make in an entire day in the East End. That's when he saw the black car pull up in front of the hotel. A driver got out quickly and opened the back door. Another man, a security guard by his uniform, got out first, and then carefully a wheelchair began to emerge. Gabriel watched curiously. He didn't see many wheelchairs around here. The man sitting in it was about 50, with well-cut grey hair, an impeccable navy blue suit, and an upright posture despite his physical limitation. He had an air of authority, of someone used to being respected. The security guard pushed the chair towards the hotel entrance. Gabriel instinctively moved closer, thinking of offering help, perhaps holding the door, but he stopped halfway. Something had caught his attention. As the man in the wheelchair gestured to the security guard, the sleeve of his suit jacket rode up slightly. And there, on his left wrist, Gabriel saw something that made his heart stop. A tattoo, old, faded, but unmistakable. An anchor intertwined with a rose. Exactly like his mother's tattoo. The world around him seemed to slow down. The noise of the cars became distant. The people turned into blurs. Gabriel stood paralyzed, his eyes fixed on that mark he knew so well. It couldn't be a coincidence. It couldn't be just a similar design. It was identical. The same lines, the same faded colors, the same story etched into the skin. The boy felt his legs tremble. 1,000 thoughts raced through his head in seconds. Could it be him? Could it be Edward Allman, the man his mother had loved and who had abandoned them, the father he had never known? The anger he had always felt began to mix with something different. Curiosity, fear, confusion, a desire to scream, a desire to run away, a desire to know the truth. Gabriel took a deep breath. His hands were sweating. His heart was beating so hard he thought everyone could hear it. But something stronger than fear propelled him forward. Maybe it was desperation for his sick mother. Maybe it was the need to understand the past. Maybe it was simply fate playing its part. He took a step forward, then another, and another, until he was right next to the wheelchair which had stopped near the hotel reception. The security guard looked at him with suspicion, gesturing for him to move away, but Gabriel didn't back down. With a trembling but determined voice, the boy finally spoke. "Sir, I need to talk to you. It's important. It's about a tattoo." The man in the wheelchair turned his head slowly, his dark eyes meeting the boy's. For a moment, he seemed annoyed by the interruption, but then his gaze fell to his own arm, to the sleeve that had ridden up and revealed the tattoo. He frowned, intrigued. "What did you say, boy?" Gabriel swallowed hard. There was no turning back now. The words came out before he could think them through. "That tattoo on your wrist, an anchor with a rose. My mother has the same one. Exactly the same. And she told me a story about a man named Edward Allman, a man she loved, a man who got this tattoo with her, a man who abandoned her when she was pregnant." The silence that followed was deafening. The face of the man in the wheelchair turned pale, as if he had seen a ghost. His hands gripped the armrests of the chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His eyes widened, his breathing became heavy. For long seconds he couldn't speak. He just stared at Gabriel as if he were facing something impossible, as if the past had just knocked on the door of the present with the full force of a runaway train. And when he finally managed to speak, his voice came out hoarse, choked, laden with an emotion he couldn't control. "Marianne, your mother's name is Marianne." It wasn't a question, it was a statement, a certainty that came from somewhere deep in his memory. Gabriel felt tears burn in his eyes. He nodded, unable to utter a single word. The man in the wheelchair brought his hands to his face, trembling visibly. And at that moment, in front of a luxury hotel, in the middle of the bustling Mayfair district, two completely opposite worlds collided through an old faded tattoo. A mark that carried not just ink and design, but a whole story of love, pain, abandonment, and truths that were about to come to light. Edward Allman couldn't stop shaking. His hands gripped the armrests of his wheelchair with an immense force, as if he needed to hold on to something solid to keep from falling apart. The name he had just uttered echoed in his mind like a cry from the past. Marianne. How many years had it been? 15. 16. And now, here was a scared-looking boy, dirty, thin, saying she was his mother, that she had the same tattoo, that he, Edward, had abandoned her when she was pregnant. No, he murmured, his voice hoarse. It wasn't like that. It wasn't like that. Gabriel took a step back, confused by the man's reaction. The security guard moved closer, trying to usher the boy away, but Edward raised his hand in a sharp gesture, stopping him. "Leave him," he ordered, without taking his eyes off Gabriel. "Please, leave him." The security guard retreated but remained alert. A few hotel guests were starting to watch the scene, curious. Edward didn't care. At that moment, the whole world could be watching, and he wouldn't have noticed. His attention was completely focused on this frail boy, with his torn clothes and face marked by the harshness of the streets. "How long has your mother been like this? Living on the street?" Edward's voice came out broken, laden with guilt. 4 years, Gabriel answered, still suspicious. "But life was hard before that. It always has been." Edward closed his eyes tightly, feeling a physical pain in his chest. 4 years. A child living on the streets for 4 years. And before that, a life of hardship. All because he hadn't been able to find her. All because a misunderstanding had destroyed the future they should have built together. "Where is she now? I need to see her. I need to talk to her." Gabriel hesitated. All the anger he had cultivated over the years was still there, pulsing in his veins. This rich, well-dressed man, with a driver and security, had abandoned his mother. Why should he take him to her? Why should he trust him? But then he thought of the fever that wouldn't break, the cough that worsened every day, the desperation he felt every night, afraid of waking up to find his mother lifeless. And he realized he had no choice. If this man really was Edward Allman, if he really had some history with his mother, maybe he could help. Maybe he could pay for a doctor, a hospital, real medicine. "She's very sick," Gabriel said, his voice breaking. "She has a high fever, a cough, she can barely even get up. I try to buy medicine, but it's not enough. She needs a doctor, she needs help." Edward felt tears burn in his eyes. He hadn't cried in years. Since the accident that had left him in this chair, he had learned to control his emotions, to be strong, to show no weakness. But at that moment, the entire armor he had built around himself crumbled. "Take me to her," he pleaded, and it was no longer an order. It was a plea. "Please, I'm begging you, take me to her." Gabriel looked at this powerful man, reduced to a desperate plea, and saw sincerity in his eyes. He saw pain. He saw regret. And against all his instincts, against all the anger he felt, he agreed. "She's in an abandoned building in the East End. It's a long way from here." "It doesn't matter, we'll go now." Edward turned to his security guard and gave quick instructions. The driver was called. Within minutes, they were in the car. Gabriel sat in the back, still unable to believe what was happening, while Edward sat in the front, the wheelchair folded in the boot. The security guard followed them in another vehicle. During the journey, a heavy silence filled the car. Gabriel looked out the window, watching the landscape gradually change. The luxurious buildings gave way to simpler constructions, then to modest houses, until they reached the potholed, dirty streets of the East End. It was like traveling between 2 different countries within the same city. Edward observed everything intently, every shack, every unpaved street, every barefoot child playing on the pavement. How had Marianne ended up here? How had the woman he loved, the woman who should have been his wife, fallen into this situation? When Gabriel pointed out the abandoned building, Edward felt a lump in his throat. The driver parked the car. The security guard got out first, surveying the place with suspicion. Edward was transferred to his wheelchair, and Gabriel guided them to the entrance. The ground was uneven, full of rubble. The wheelchair struggled to get through, but the security guard pushed it carefully. They went up a makeshift ramp through corridors of exposed concrete until they reached a corner where pieces of cardboard were stacked to form a sort of bed. And there, lying down, wrapped in a torn blanket, was Marianne. Edward felt the air leave his lungs. Even pale, even thin, even with her face marked by suffering, she was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Her dark hair, now longer and disheveled, still had the shine he remembered. Her eyes, when she opened them upon hearing footsteps, still had the depth that had made him fall in love years ago. Marianne blinked several times, confused. The high fever was blurring her vision. She thought she was delirious when she saw the silhouette of a man in a wheelchair being pushed towards her. But as he got closer, as the faint light from the window illuminated his face, she felt her heart race. "Edward," she whispered, her voice so low it was barely audible. "Marianne. My God, Marianne." He leaned forward in his chair, extending a trembling hand. She looked at that hand, saw the tattoo on his wrist, and the memories came flooding back like an avalanche. The love they had shared, the happiness they had known, the day they got the tattoos together, and then the pain, the betrayal she had seen, the kiss she had witnessed. "Why are you here?" she asked, and there was no anger in her voice, only exhaustion, a deep, old sadness. "Because I never stopped looking for you, because I never forgot you, because I never betrayed you." The words came out in a rush. Edward couldn't control himself. He had waited so long for this moment, had imagined so many times what he would say if he found her, and now everything was pouring out without order, without control. "You betrayed me. I saw you. I saw you with that woman. I saw you kissing." "No, Marianne, no. You saw what Patricia wanted you to see. She was my assistant. She had an unhealthy obsession with me. When she found out about us, about our relationship, she started planning a way to separate us. That day, she knew you were coming to the office. She called me over to sign some urgent documents, and when I leaned over the desk, she threw herself at me and kissed me. It was at that exact moment that you walked in." Marianne shook her head, tears starting to stream down her face. "But you didn't look for me. You didn't come after me." "I did look, Marianne. God is my witness how much I looked. When I realized you had run away, I was frantic. I went to your flat, to your parents' house, your friends. No one knew where you were. Your cousin said you had left but didn't say where. I hired private investigators. I spent a fortune trying to find you, but you had simply vanished." Gabriel listened in silence, leaning against the wall. His mind processed every word, every revelation. The story his mother had always told was being deconstructed right in front of him. There had been no betrayal. There had been a misunderstanding, a trap, a cruel mistake that had cost all of them years of suffering. "And then I had the accident," Edward continued, his voice heavy. "I was coming back from a business trip, desperate, thinking about you, and I didn't see the lorry coming. I hit it head on. I spent months in the hospital, 3 spinal surgeries. The doctor said I would never walk again, and even then, even trapped in that hospital bed, I never stopped thinking about you, wondering where you were, if you were okay, if you had moved on." Marianne covered her face with her hands, sobbing. All this time, all this suffering, based on a lie, based on a misinterpreted scene. "I was pregnant, Edward. I was pregnant when I left, and I raised our son alone. I starved so he could eat. I worked 3 jobs at once, and when I couldn't manage anymore, when life became impossible, we ended up here, on the streets, sleeping on cardboard." Edward looked at Gabriel, really looked, and he saw beyond the dirt, beyond the torn clothes, beyond the thinness. He saw his own eyes reflected in that young face. He saw Marianne's features mixed with his own. He saw the son he had never known, the son who had grown up without a father, the son who had lived on the streets while he built a business empire. The pain he felt in that moment was greater than any physical pain he had ever experienced, greater than the pain of the accident, greater than the pain of the surgeries. It was the pain of knowing he had lost 12 years of his son's life, the pain of knowing that while he slept on silk sheets, his boy slept on cardboard, that while he had private doctors, his family lived without basic medicine. "My son," he murmured, extending his arms towards Gabriel. "My son." Gabriel didn't move. He was still processing, still trying to understand. The anger he had always felt was being replaced by confusion, and by something he was afraid to acknowledge. Hope. Edward turned to his security guard. "Call an ambulance. No, wait, call Dr. Henry. Tell him it's urgent. Tell him to bring everything necessary. And then call the estate agent. I need a furnished flat. Today. I don't care about the price. 3 bedrooms, good location, with everything we need." The security guard took out his phone and started making calls. Edward turned his attention back to Marianne, who was still lying down, too weak to get up. "You're going to get better," he promised, holding her hand. "I'll take care of you, both of you. I'll make up for every lost day, every tear, every moment of suffering." "Why should I believe you?" Marianne asked, but her voice had no strength. She wanted to believe. God knew how much she wanted to. "Because I love you. I always have. From the first day I saw you, cleaning that office corridor, humming softly, you lit up my life, and when you left, the light went out. I built companies, made a fortune, achieved success, but none of it meant anything without you." Marianne's tears wouldn't stop falling. Years of pain, of loneliness, of despair were being washed away by those words. Words she had always wanted to hear. Words she had dreamt of during endless nights. In less than an hour, Dr. Henry arrived. A private doctor, with a case full of equipment. He examined Marianne right there, in the abandoned building, with the same attention he would give in a luxury clinic. The diagnosis was serious. Acute pneumonia, possibly developing into something more severe. Chronic bronchitis, severe malnutrition, dehydration. "She needs to be admitted immediately," the doctor told Edward. But Edward shook his head. "No, no NHS hospital. Take her to the London clinic. I want the best room, the best doctors, everything necessary. And take care of the boy too. I want a full checkup on him." Gabriel tried to protest, but he was too exhausted. When the paramedics arrived with the stretcher, he watched his mother being carefully placed on it, covered with clean sheets, connected to an IV drip. She looked so small, so fragile. Edward held Gabriel's hand. "You're coming with me. I'm not leaving you here." And for the first time in his life, Gabriel didn't have to be strong. He didn't have to take care of anyone. He didn't have to worry about where he would sleep or what he would eat. For the first time, someone was taking care of him, and even without fully understanding what was happening, still confused and scared, he let the man in the wheelchair guide him out of that abandoned building. At the hospital, Marianne was immediately taken to a luxury suite. Doctors came and went, running tests, administering medication, stabilizing her condition. Gabriel took a hot shower for the first time in weeks, put on new clothes that Edward had sent for, and ate a full meal. When he finally sat beside the bed where his mother slept, connected to monitors and drips, he felt the tears fall. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of fear that it was all just a dream. Edward entered the room in his wheelchair, stopping beside Gabriel. "She's going to be okay," he said, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "The doctors said we got here just in time. A few more days and it would have been too late." Gabriel looked at him. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." Edward smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Because you're my son, and because I've already lost 12 years of your life, I'm not going to lose another second." They stood there, side by side, watching Marianne sleep. 2 generations separated by time and circumstance, but united by an old, faded tattoo, an anchor intertwined with a rose, a symbol of a love that had survived everything. Separation, pain, time, distance, and that now, finally, was fulfilling its original promise. The promise of stability, the promise of a home, the promise that, no matter what happened, that love would always find its way back. The London clinic was like another world to Gabriel, gleaming white corridors, machines that beeped softly. Nurses in immaculate uniforms moved with silent efficiency. The smell of disinfectant was strong, but not unpleasant. It was the smell of hope, the smell of a place where people were truly cared for. Marianne was taken straight to the emergency unit. A team of doctors gathered around her, asking questions, examining her, connecting machines. Gabriel watched from a distance, not understanding half the medical terms he heard. Pneumonia, hypoxia, respiratory failure, severe malnutrition, dehydration. Each word sounded like a sentence, but the doctors spoke with professional calm, reassuring them that everything would be done. Edward was beside Gabriel, his hand resting on the boy's shoulder. Even sitting in the wheelchair, his presence exuded security. He had the posture of someone accustomed to solving problems, to making things happen, and he was determined to use all his resources to save Marianne. The lead doctor, a man in his 50s with white hair and thin-rimmed glasses, approached them after the initial tests. "Mr. Allman, the patient is in serious condition, but stable. She has developed acute bacterial pneumonia, complicated by malnutrition and untreated chronic bronchitis. We're admitting her to the ICU for constant monitoring. We'll need intravenous antibiotics, oxygen therapy, and nutritional support. The prognosis is good, but it will take a few weeks for her to recover completely." Edward nodded, absorbing every piece of information. "Doctor, do whatever is necessary. There is no budget limit. I want the best professionals, the best treatments, everything she needs. Rest assured, Mr. Allman, she's in good hands." The doctor walked away and Edward looked at Gabriel. The boy was pale, his eyes red from crying, his hands trembling slightly. "She's going to be okay, Gabriel, I promise." "What if she's not? What if it's too late?" The boy's voice was fragile, filled with fear. Edward pulled his chair closer and held Gabriel's dirty hands in his. "Look at me. Your mother is strong, stronger than me, stronger than anyone I know. She survived 12 years alone, raising you, facing the streets, hunger, the cold. If she endured all that, she'll endure this hospital stay too. Trust me." Gabriel wanted to believe. He needed to believe. He nodded, wiping tears with the back of his hand. While Marianne was being transferred to the ICU, Marcus, Edward's assistant, approached with a tablet. "Mr. Allman, I've found a flat, available in Islington. 3 bedrooms, furnished, secure building. I can close the deal today. Close it, and arrange for clothes for the boy. Child size, 12 years old. Everything new. Shoes, jackets, bedding, towels, everything a family needs. And food. Fill the fridge, fill the cupboards, understood?" "Yes, sir. I'll have everything arranged by tomorrow." Edward turned back to Gabriel. "You're going to have a shower, eat a decent meal, and sleep in a real bed tonight. Your mother would be angry with me if I left you dirty and hungry while she's here." Gabriel looked down at his own. Clothes? He was filthy. He hadn't showered in days. His hair was matted, his nails black with dirt, his feet sore inside his torn trainers. For the first time, he felt ashamed. Not of poverty itself, but of being in this state in front of the man who was his father. "I don't have any clean clothes to change into. You will. Marcus will arrange everything. But first, let's see your mother one more time before we go." They were allowed into the ICU for a few minutes. Marianne was sleeping, connected to several machines. An oxygen mask covered her face. Her hair had been washed and combed by the nurses. Even pale and sick, she looked more at peace than Gabriel had seen her in weeks. Edward moved his chair close to the bed and gently held her hand. Gabriel stood on the other side, doing the same. For a few minutes, the 3 of them remained like that, a silent family, finally reunited, even in such difficult circumstances. "I'll be back early tomorrow, Marianne, and I'll bring our son, well cared for. Rest, get well." "We have a lot of lost time to make up for," Edward whispered. They left the ICU and headed to the car. Marcus drove to a 5-star hotel in Mayfair. Edward kept a permanent suite there for when he needed to stay in London. The flat Marcus had rented would only be ready the next day. When they entered the suite, Gabriel stopped at the door, stunned. It was bigger than any place he had ever lived. Leather sofas, a huge television, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the illuminated city, a bedroom with a king-size bed, a bathroom with a bathtub. Everything was luxurious, clean, and smelled wonderful. "You can take a shower in there. Marcus will bring clothes shortly, and then we'll order food. What do you like to eat?" Gabriel didn't even know how to answer. Food for him had always been whatever he could find. Leftovers from bakeries, meals from churches, scraps that shopkeepers gave away at the end of the day. "Anything," I'll eat anything." Edward smiled sadly. He realized the boy wasn't just being polite. He simply had no frame of reference for choosing food. "I'll order a bit of everything. Rice, beans, steak, chips, salad, a sandwich, juice, dessert, and tomorrow you can tell me what you liked best." Gabriel went into the bathroom and stood there, looking around. The bathtub was huge, gleaming. There were wrapped soaps, shampoos in beautiful bottles, fluffy white towels stacked neatly. He turned on the shower, and hot water gushed out, filling the room with steam. He took off his dirty clothes and stepped under the water. The sensation was indescribable. He was used to taking cold showers at public taps, quickly, always afraid someone would show up. But here, in this hot, plentiful water, he could stay as long as he wanted. He scrubbed his body hard, watching the dirt run down the drain. He washed his hair 3 times until he felt it was truly clean. He stood there for almost half an hour, letting the hot water relieve the tensions built up over years of a hard life. When he got out, wrapped in a fluffy towel, he found new clothes on the bed. Marcus had been quick. Jeans, a white t-shirt, underwear, socks, new trainers. Everything was the right size. Gabriel dressed slowly, admiring each item. For the first time in a long time, he felt clean. He felt human. Edward was in the living room, also freshly showered, wearing comfortable clothes. He had ordered food and the table was full. Gabriel sat down and began to eat slowly, trying not to show the desperate hunger he felt. But Edward noticed. He saw the way the boy's eyes lit up at the sight of so much food, the way his hands trembled as he picked up the cutlery. "Eat at your own pace, and you can have as many servings as you want." Gabriel ate until he couldn't eat anymore. It was the first time in his life he felt truly full. After dinner, Edward took him to the bedroom. "You'll sleep here. I'll take the sofa in the living room. You don't have to. I can sleep on the floor. I'm used to it." "No. You will sleep in a bed, a real bed, with clean sheets and a soft pillow. It's the least I can do for you after everything you've been through." Gabriel lay down on the bed, sinking into the soft mattress. It was like being on a cloud. He covered himself with the duvet and felt a comfort he had never experienced. But even exhausted, he couldn't sleep. His head was full of thoughts, emotions, fears and hopes all mixed together. Edward appeared at the door, pushing his wheelchair. "May I come in?" "Yes." He entered and stopped beside the bed. "I know this is all a lot to process. I know you're still angry with me. I know it will take time for you to trust me. But I want you to know one thing. I never wanted to abandon you. I never wanted to abandon your mother. If I had known she was pregnant, I would have turned the world upside down to find her. Do you believe me?" Gabriel was silent for a moment, processing the words. "I want to believe you, but it's hard. We suffered so much. My mother almost died today. What if you hadn't passed by that hotel? What if I hadn't seen the tattoo? We would still be suffering. We would still be invisible. You're right, but fate wanted us to meet. And now that I've found you both, I will never leave you alone again. Never again. Do you promise?" "I promise." "And about being my father? Do you want to be my real father?" Edward's voice broke. He leaned forward, from his chair, reaching for Gabriel's hand. "I have always been your father, Gabriel, even without knowing you existed. You are my son, my blood, my continuation, and being your father is the most important thing I can be in this life." Gabriel felt the tears return, but this time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of relief, of hope, of a possibility he had never considered, the possibility of having a real home. They talked for another hour. Edward told him about his life, his businesses, the accident that left him in a wheelchair. Gabriel told him about the streets, about how he took care of his mother, about the difficult days and cold nights. Slowly, the distance between them began to shrink. When Gabriel finally fell asleep, Edward stayed there, watching the son he had just met. He saw the marks of a hard life, the calloused feet, the small bruised hands, the face still childish, but already marked by adult worries, and he swore to himself that he would change that. He would give this boy everything he deserved: education, health, opportunities, love. In the following days, a routine began to form. Every morning, Edward and Gabriel went to the hospital to visit Marianne. She was responding well to the treatment. The fever had gone down. Her breathing was more regular. The doctors were optimistic. The flat in Islington was ready. 3 bedrooms, a large living room, a fully equipped kitchen. Marcus had arranged everything. New furniture, clothes in all sizes, a full fridge, stocked cupboards, everything a family needed to start over. Gabriel began living there, visiting his mother every day with Edward. For the first time, he experienced what it was like to have a real home, to be able to take a hot shower whenever he wanted, to sleep in a bed every night, to eat 3 meals a day, to study because Edward had enrolled him in a nearby private school with tutoring to make up for the lost years. The first few weeks were difficult. Gabriel wasn't used to a routine, waking up early, going to school, doing homework. Everything was new and frightening, but Edward was always there. He helped with homework, encouraged him, showed him that he believed in him. At school, Gabriel was quiet. The other students came from stable families, and he felt different. But slowly, with the support of therapists Edward hired, he began to open up. He made friends. He discovered he was good at maths. He started to enjoy reading. 3 weeks after being admitted, Marianne was discharged. The doctors were impressed with her recovery. She had gained weight. Her breathing was normal. The color had returned to her face. When she entered the flat for the first time, leaning on Edward, who insisted on getting out of his chair to walk her to the sofa, she cried. She cried seeing her son clean, well-dressed, healthy. She cried seeing the tidy rooms, the equipped kitchen, the life she had never been able to give Gabriel. She cried realizing she finally had a home, a real home. Edward sat beside her on the sofa, Gabriel on the other side. The 3 of them sat there in silence, just feeling each other's presence. "Thank you," Marianne whispered, looking at Edward. "Thank you for not giving up on me, for saving us. I should be thanking you for giving me a wonderful son, for surviving, for being here now." She took his hand, intertwining their fingers. Gabriel watched his parents, seeing the connection that still existed between them even after so much time apart. Slowly, life began to settle. Marianne fully recovered and started working at Edward's company, helping with social projects. She had life experience that no executive possessed. She knew what it was to be in need. She knew what people living on the streets needed. Gabriel continued to progress in school. In 6 months, he had caught up completely. In a year, he was among the top students in his class. He discovered he wanted to work with people. He wanted to help others like him, others who lived on the streets, invisible, forgotten. It was one evening during dinner that Gabriel made the proposal that would change everything. "Dad, Mum, I have an idea. I want to create a foundation to help street children. I want to give them what you gave me, a chance, hope, a family." Edward and Marianne looked at each other. They saw in their son the same determination that had brought them to this point, the same strength that had helped them survive. And they knew, in that moment, that Gabriel had a purpose, and that they would help him fulfill that purpose, whatever it took. Gabriel's idea wasn't just a teenage dream. It was a purpose born from pain, from lived experience, from the certainty that no one should go through what he had. And Edward, an experienced businessman, knew how to recognize when an idea had potential. More than that, he knew how to recognize when a cause deserved to be embraced with all one's strength. In the following months, the family dedicated themselves completely to the project. Edward used his network of contacts, his financial resources, and his administrative experience to structure the foundation. Marianne contributed with her field knowledge, her natural empathy, and her ability to understand the real needs of those living on the street. Gabriel, though still a teenager, was the heart of the project. He was the one who went to the streets, talked to the children, understood their fears and dreams. The first step was to find a suitable property. Edward bought an old disused school in the East End, near where Gabriel and Marianne had lived. It was a large building with spacious rooms, a large courtyard, and an industrial kitchen. It needed renovations, but it had potential. For 6 months, construction work transformed that abandoned space into a true home. Dormitories were built, with comfortable bunk beds and individual lockers. A library was set up, with donated books and computers for research. Classrooms were equipped. A large, welcoming dining hall was created. Medical and dental clinics were installed, and a courtyard with a sports court was refurbished so the children could play. Marianne insisted on small details that made all the difference: colorful curtains on the windows, plants in the hallways, pictures on the walls. She knew that a welcoming environment was crucial for those who had never had a real home. While the physical space was being prepared, Edward assembled a multidisciplinary team. He hired educators, psychologists, social workers, nutritionists, and nurses. He sought professionals who not only had technical competence, but who genuinely cared about the cause. Gabriel participated in every stage. In meetings, despite being the youngest in the room, his contributions were taken seriously. He knew things that no manual could teach. He knew that street children are initially afraid of enclosed spaces. He knew they need time to trust adults. He knew that plentiful food in the first few weeks can cause digestive problems for those who have starved for a long time. He knew that before teaching maths or English, you had to teach them that they were important, that they were seen, that they mattered. The Fresh Start Foundation was inaugurated on a sunny September morning. The name had been Marianne's suggestion, because that's what it was about: giving children the chance to start over, to rewrite their stories. On the first day, 20 children were welcomed. Boys and girls between 7 and 15, all from the streets of the East End. Scared, suspicious, thin, dirty, exactly as Gabriel had once been. The team received them with patience, offering showers, clean clothes, food. No pressure, no demands, just a welcome. Gabriel was there, talking to each one, telling his own story, showing that he understood, that he had lived it, that it was possible to get out. The children looked at him with a mixture of admiration and hope. If he had managed, maybe they could too. In the first few months, the challenges were enormous. Some children ran away during the night, returning to the streets they knew. Others had angry outbursts, breaking things, fighting. Many had deep traumas that needed to be treated. But the team didn't give up. Every child who ran away was sought out, invited back without judgment. Every angry outburst was met with patience. Every trauma was treated with care. Slowly, the foundation began to function like a real family. The children started attending school again, with tutors helping them catch up. They began therapy, working through their traumas. They started eating regularly, gaining weight and health. They started to play, to smile, to dream. Edward visited the foundation weekly. Even in his wheelchair, he made a point of knowing each child by name, asking how they were, encouraging their progress. His presence was inspiring. The children saw in him someone who, despite physical limitations, had built an empire and was now using his resources to help. They saw that disability was not a limitation, that obstacles could be overcome. Marianne worked directly with the children's mothers when possible. Many lived in situations of extreme vulnerability, victims of violence, with no prospect of change. She created a specific program for these women, offering vocational courses, psychological support, and help with documentation and employment, because she knew that to save a child, you often had to save the whole family. By the end of the first year, 200 children had been helped. Some had been reintegrated with their families after they became stable. Others remained at the foundation, which had become their home. All had returned to school. All had gained weight. All had started to smile again. The stories of transformation were moving. Lucas, a 10-year-old boy who sold sweets at traffic lights, discovered a talent for drawing and started making comics about his life. Julia, a 13-year-old girl who had been abused by her stepfather and run away from home, found shelter and treatment, regaining her self-belief. Peter, a 15-year-old involved in petty theft, discovered a passion for mechanics and got an apprenticeship at a garage. And with each success story, Gabriel felt his purpose was being fulfilled. But he knew there was still much to do. There were still thousands of children on the streets, thousands of stories that needed to be rewritten. When he turned 18, Gabriel applied for university to study social work. He got in with top marks. Edward wanted to celebrate with a big party, but Gabriel asked for something different. He wanted to celebrate at the foundation with the children, and so they did. A simple, party with cake, fizzy drinks, and lots of music. The children sang happy birthday to him, and Gabriel cried with emotion. During his 4 years at university, he continued to work at the foundation. He woke up early, went to classes, and came back in the afternoon to help. At night, he studied. On weekends, he went to the streets to find more children, offering help, distributing food and blankets, showing them there was hope. The foundation continued to grow. In its second year, 500 children were helped. New branches were opened in other parts of the city. Business. Leaders began to donate, inspired by the cause and the transparency with which Edward managed everything. The project won awards, national recognition, and became a model for other initiatives. Marianne and Edward, who had been reunited through pain, also rebuilt their relationship. It wasn't easy. There were 12 years of separation, of hurt, of different lives, but the love that had united them in the past still existed, transformed, matured, but present. 2 years after their reunion, they married in a simple ceremony with Gabriel as the witness and all the children from the foundation present. It was one of the happiest days of their lives. Gabriel graduated from university with academic honors in social work. His dissertation on the social reintegration of street children was considered exemplary and became a reference in the field. He could have pursued an academic career, but he chose direct work. He returned to the foundation, now as the coordinator of social educators. His job was to go to the streets every day, to talk to children and teenagers, to offer help, to show them there was a different path, and his approach was unique because he spoke from his own experience. It wasn't textbook theory. It was real life. Many children resisted at first, suspicious of yet another empty promise. But when Gabriel told his story, when he showed them the tattoo he shared with his parents, when he explained that he had lived in the same abandoned building, slept on the same cardboard, felt the same hunger, their eyes would change. They would begin to believe that maybe it was possible, that maybe there was hope. One Friday night, 5 years after the foundation was created, Gabriel was invited to give a speech at a major social responsibility event in London. Leaders, politicians, journalists, everyone would be there. Edward and Marianne went with him, sitting in the front row. Gabriel walked onto the stage in his simple suit, with his neat hair and confident posture. It was hard to imagine that this articulate 23-year-old had been the dirty, thin boy who slept in abandoned buildings. He began to speak. He told his story from the beginning. Life on the streets, his sick mother, the constant hunger, the cold of the early mornings, the social invisibility. Then he told them about the day he saw the tattoo on the wrist of a man in front of a hotel. How it changed everything. How he discovered the truth about the past. How he found a father. How he gained a family. How he received a second chance. The audience was in complete silence. Some discreetly wiped away tears. Others were visibly moved. Gabriel continued, talking about the foundation, about the children who had been helped, about the importance of seeing the invisible, of extending a hand, of believing that every life matters. And then, at the end of his speech, he did something that wasn't in the script. He stopped talking. He looked at his parents in the front row. He smiled, and he began to roll up the sleeve of his dress shirt. Slowly, he revealed something on his forearm, a recent tattoo, an anchor intertwined with a rose, the same design his parents carried. He had gotten it on the day he graduated. A tribute, a continuation of the story, a symbol that the love that had united Edward and Marianne had borne fruit. It had created a family. It had transformed lives. With a choked voice, Gabriel continued, "This tattoo changed my life. Not because of the design itself, but because of what it represents. It represents a love that time could not destroy. It represents second chances. It represents forgiveness. It represents the certainty that it's never too late to start over. When I see it on my arm, I remember where I came from. I remember the boy I was. I remember the mother I almost lost. I remember the father I found. And I remember all the children who are still out there, invisible, forgotten, waiting for someone to see them." Edward and Marianne were crying openly. They didn't hide their tears. They were tears of pride, of love. of gratitude for being alive to see this moment. Gabriel finished his speech with an appeal. He asked everyone present to do something, anything. Donate a sum of money, volunteer, sponsor a child, offer a job to a vulnerable young person. Simply stop and talk to those living on the streets to give them back the dignity of being seen. The audience rose to a prolonged standing ovation. Many approached him afterward, making commitments to help. Companies offered partnerships. Volunteers signed up. The foundation received more donations that night than in entire months. When they left the event, it was already late. Edward, Marianne, and Gabriel walked together through the empty London streets. They passed, by coincidence or not, near the abandoned building where it had all begun. It was still there. Empty, dark, a silent witness to so many stories of suffering. Gabriel stopped in front of the building. His parents stopped beside him. The three of them stood there, looking at the place that represented the past. A past of pain, but also of resistance, of survival, of a love that never gave up. "I've come back here a few times," Gabriel said, breaking the silence. "Whenever I feel lost or when I think the work is too hard, I come back here to remember where I came from, to remember that every child we help was me, was us." Marianne held her son's hand. Edward, from his wheelchair, held the other. The three of them remained like that, united by the pain of the past and the hope of the future. "We built a family on the ruins of separation," Edward said. "We built a home on the experience of the street. We built hope on the foundation of despair. And now we are helping hundreds of other families do the same. And we'll help thousands," Gabriel added, "because every child deserves what I received, a chance, a family, a fresh start." They went back home, to the flat Edward had bought, which was now the family's home. No longer the luxurious hotel or the abandoned building, but a real home, with photos on the walls, the smell of home-cooked food, with laughter and arguments and hugs, with love. Gabriel went into his room and looked at the photos on his desk. One was from the day he graduated, another from his parents' wedding, another from a party at the foundation. But the one he liked best was an old one, taken by Marcus on that first day at the hospital. Edward and Gabriel, each holding one of Marianne's hands in the ICU, three strangers who were about to become a family. He raised his arm, looking at the tattoo he had gotten, the anchor, the rose, the symbol of everything they were, of everything they had achieved, of everything they would still achieve together. And he smiled, because he knew their story wasn't about perfection. It was about new beginnings, about forgiveness, about a love that endures time and circumstance, about a tattoo that ceased to be a mark of pain and became a symbol of hope. The Fresh Start Foundation would continue to grow. More branches would open, more children would be saved, more families would be rebuilt. And all because a 12-year-old boy had the courage to approach a stranger in a wheelchair, because a mother had the strength to survive, because a father never gave up searching, because an old, faded tattoo carried more than ink. It carried destiny. The next morning, Gabriel woke up early, as always. He had breakfast with his parents. They talked about plans for the foundation, about the new children who would be welcomed, about the challenges that still lay ahead. But they also laughed, made jokes, planned a weekend together. Before leaving, Gabriel hugged his mother. A long, tight hug full of gratitude that she had survived, had fought, had been strong when everything told her to give up. Then he hugged his father. A hug that carried all the lost time and all the time they still had ahead. And he went out to the street, no longer as an invisible child looking for spare change, but as a social educator, as someone with a mission, with a purpose, who knew that his story wasn't just his. It belonged to all those who still needed to be seen, to all those still waiting for a second chance, to all those who carried pain but deserved hope. And as he walked through the streets of London, Gabriel knew he carried with him more than just a tattoo. He carried a story of love that had conquered abandonment, a story of a family that had risen from the ashes, a story of faith that had turned pain into purpose, and that story he knew was just beginning. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Gabriel, Marianne, and Edward has deeply touched your heart. If you were moved by this journey of new beginnings, forgiveness, and second chances, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment marked you the most. Was it the emotional reunion, Gabriel's courage, Marianne's strength, or Edward's determination to reclaim lost time? Every day we bring you intense stories like this one, which reveal the deepest side of the human soul and show us that it's never too late to start over. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode with another narrative that will stir your emotions and make you believe in the transformative power of love.